Hey guys, welcome back to my ambition.
Hi, everybody.
Hello,
It's Alex and
and Tiffany. Today we have a wonderful guest for you all. We have Nabila Salem. Nabila is in the house. Woo! So, for anyone who does not know Nabila, she has a wealth of leadership experience in professional services and talent solutions and marketing with a passion for EDI, mentoring, and coaching. She's currently on the board of 10th Revolution Group, that's TRG, which is a parent company of various talent delivery brands. And as group president of Revolent, she leads the creation of tech talent. She's also president of TRG Strategic Projects and is responsible for leading and executing critical initiatives alongside the board of TRG. Nabila was recognized in Management Today's 35 Women Under 35 list 2019. And selected as Global's most inspiring executive UK in 2021. She's on the advisory board for Migrant Leaders UK, and for several years, she's been a judge of the Women in Tech Employer Awards. Under Nabila's leadership, Revelant won multiple awards, including Diversity Employer of the Year at the Computing Women in Tech Excellence Awards for 3 consecutive years. She's also a mom of a 2-year-old daughter, which she considers to be her biggest achievement so far. Wow, what an intro!
yes,
What an
welcome.
intro!
Thank you. That was a big intro. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's amazing. I think what I love to start with, I think against the backdrop of this intro, I'd love to know where your story really started in terms of just a quick summary of, your background, your childhood, and how that's reflected on the woman that you are today.
Yeah, I think the who
Absolutely.
the who you are behind the
Yeah.
achievements.
Sure. Yes, happy to sort of delve into my background. Okay, so I grew up in Spain. I grew up in a multicultural household. I have a Spanish mother. I have an Arabic father. I was the youngest of 4 siblings, and I think what really shaped me was the experiences that I went through. It wasn't a typical childhood. I mean, I had a lovely childhood, but as life does, it throws curveballs at you, and we have to adapt and sort of um, learn to be resilient. So when I was 11 years old, actually, my father had a stroke and followed multiple complications. Basically, he was in bed for 4 years before he passed away. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because that really made me, I believe, who I am today. We had to care for him at home around the clock, right? So we took turns. And that was our responsibility. My father was a breadwinner at home. So my mother, back in the day before she met my father, was a hairdresser. But then when she met my father, it was a very traditional household. He worked, she stayed at home. But obviously all of that changed when he got ill. So she retrained. She launched a new career in her 50s. She sold every valuable she had in order to make ends meet and launched her own business. And
Wow.
without knowing this, Tiffany, she taught us resilience. She taught us adaptability, patience, determination, and so much more. And when I look back, I think, I smile when I look back, actually, despite it being difficult times, because I think without everything that we had learned and without the situation that we had ahead of us, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I think, as well as being our inspiration, she is, to me, the epitome of ambition. Her ambition was to make us successful, and she achieved that. All 4 of us are successful. So all 4 of us, and my siblings, and I just think that's fantastic. And that's what I think I'm waffling a little bit here.
Not at all, not at all. I think that hearing about that success and that what your mother has been able to bring to, that she was able to put herself out there after so many years in the home. I think that really does scream resilience.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, she's our inspiration. We obviously very much admire her, and I think that shapes who we become when we grow up. I went to university in the UK. My fees were obviously funded by the EU at the time, and you know, the condition for that was to pass every single exam. So otherwise funding would stop. So I made sure I passed every single exam because it was my responsibility to make sure that I made the most of the opportunity that I had. And I believe that some pressure is important. You know, it's important for us to have responsibilities from a young age, because ultimately we are responsible for our own life and what we make of it. So I'd say that very much shaped me to become who I am today.
Wow, that is really inspiring. And I think it's something I can relate to, because I often now look back on my life and think those things that I thought was difficult, those are almost like the chip on my shoulder now that inspires me to keep going. I was thinking just this morning, for example, I mean, I grew up in a Nigerian traditional home, and my dad was super frugal. So my dad refused to buy a washing machine. And throughout the school days, I actually used to hand wash my uniform, my blazer, and I used to have to wash my brothers as well. And I remember thinking, this is suffering, this is child abuse. I'm calling social services. But now I look back, and weirdly enough, I appreciate that, because you give me anything to wash now. I have a washing machine, but I wash anything. I don't care. Like, I wash my jacket. So it's crazy how those defining years do drive you and now inspire you. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's fantastic. I totally agree with you. I think we learn these things and we don't realize at the time that they are sort of the foundation of who we will become, you know?
Yeah, I think they really shape our values as well that we grow up with. And I think that values are really important to the type of person and the type of success that you're willing to go after. And I think hearing about your story and the board experience that you have, I think we talked about when we had our brief introductory meeting, we really talked about how that is something that very few women are able to achieve. That it's very hard for women, particularly women with children, to get onto board level experience. And I think that that's something we'd really love to delve into, you know, how you got that, and how you have, you know, the stepping stones to getting that experience.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, it's a shame, isn't it? It seems like we're going backwards now with sort of how many women join leadership positions and boards and things. For me, it started wanting to work for a big company. For me, my dream, I remember after university, was I would like to work for a big company. And I got a job at IBM, which was fantastic, you know, thrilled, over the moon. But I quickly realized that I was a very small fish in a very, very big pond. And I thought, right, long-term goals, will I achieve what I want to achieve? And at that point, I decided to move to a smaller company because I thought, right, if I join a smaller business, I'll be a much bigger fish. Therefore, hopefully I can achieve my goals that way. And that was a huge risk that I took there, but it paid off. It was brilliant, because what I did was I joined a small family business. And it was a small tech family business at the time, but I stayed there for 12 years and I worked really hard. I worked my way up, progressed up the ranks. And within that time, I was not only the youngest female VP, but I was also the youngest shareholder. And that company became a FTSE 250 company. So it set me up very well for my next career move. But at the time, you know, everyone thought I was nuts, because I went from IBM, where I was earning good money, but I was in a very junior position, to a much smaller company where I was in a very junior position and earning less money. But ultimately, it got me to where I wanted to be quicker. So sometimes taking risks enables you to achieve things, and you will hear lots of opinions along the way, etc. You've just got to stick with your gut, I think. I then took another risk at that point in time, because for various reasons I knew I wouldn't be joining the board, because it was a family business that grew very quickly, and the board and the founders were still the board and the founders. You know, there was no sort of getting into that space. So I thought, right, now's my time. I've got to jump. And I did. And that was another risk I took, was resigning without a job, which I actually wouldn't recommend to people. I think that's a lot easier. I should have got a job before I resigned. But again, that was one of the mistakes I've made in my career. But it did pay off in the end. I resigned for a little while, but I did get the position on the board that I wanted. So that's when I joined the board of 10th Revolution Group, and also had my dual role as president of Revolent, which was one of the brands. And at the time, Revolent was MFTA. So MFTA was a tiny business of 30 people. And sort of my job was to rebrand it, come up with a new strategy. And that's what became Revolent. And during sort of before maternity leave, so the first 3 years of my sort of my role as group president, we grew Revolent from 30 people to over 500 across the UK, US, Canada, Australia, Spain, Holland.
Wow.
An amazing success story. But again, curveballs everywhere, because I joined in 2020 and then COVID hit. So
I'm going to say no guesses are happening. Guessing what
Exactly.
happened next?
Well, yeah, so the strategy I came up with had to change. So we had to change that quite quickly. But again, you find ways, and it's just so important to be able to adapt and persevere. It's not always going to be, roses and flowers, but ultimately, if you stick with it, I think you can achieve what you want. And for me, when I look at sort of women who have so much potential, but perhaps lack, the belief in themselves. So, some advice I'd give other women out there is just to believe in themselves, because often the biggest barrier to success can be our own imagination. We often put those barriers up, and we need to learn to break them and believe in ourselves and just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? I got rejected by tons of people before I got this job. That's how it goes. That's the journey.
I love that. And I think again, it's key, that confidence. And I imagine that because my next question is, where does your confidence comes from? But I imagine one aspect of that is kind of your background, right? That helps you to develop confidence, to realize that it's not the end until it really is the end. So is there anywhere else that you would say that your confidence comes from?
Yes, again, but I think it was back to my mother, really. She had to build that confidence to sort of step out of her comfort zone. But when I look at human nature, our human nature really tends to gravitate towards comfort. So we like to be very comfortable, but the reality is comfortable is a dangerous place to be. And the reason it's a dangerous place to be is because the magic tends to happen outside of our comfort zone. So only when we're aiming higher, when we're trying new things and taking risks, we can really see what can be achieved. So my confidence has come from my upbringing. I've seen not just my mother start her own business, but I've also seen my sisters, my brother. They obviously have been inspired by her also, but they started their own business. So I've drawn my inspiration from there, but I've also learned a lot from my mentors. One of my mentors, who's the former CEO and chairman of IBM EMEA, Larry Hurst, he used to always say to me, if you're not making enough mistakes, you're not aiming high enough. So, that really stayed with me, because I thought, that's right. We always aim to be perfect. We always aim to get things right. We always put our hand up for opportunities that we know we can do. But what if we did something different? So since then, I've always tried to put my hand up for things that actually I might not be able to do. I'll give it my best, and hope for the best. But the worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work out. Now, luckily for me, most of the time it has. Sometimes it hasn't. But that's the worst that can happen, right? And once we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, that's groundbreaking. That's the real game changer. So confidence has to come from within. Yes, of course, draw on your mentors, draw on your friends, and speak to people. But ultimately, you have to believe in yourself, I think.
I love that. I really love that. I'm finding that incredibly inspiring. And I think, hearing about developing not just confidence that comes from people praising you and things like that, that unshakable self-belief, I think is really key. But I love your attitude around taking risks as well. I think so many people do try and strive for that perfection, and they don't want to make mistakes. But really what you're saying is that the best development comes from taking a risk and being prepared to be wrong or get it wrong. And what is the worst that can happen? It's really not that scary. And I think that's what we did when we started the podcast, actually. We didn't really know what we were doing. We knew we wanted to do something. Don't know whether we still 100%
We
know
still
what we're
don't know what
doing.
we're doing. We're having fun.
And, we did put it off for a while as well. We kept saying we talked a lot first. And I think we've talked about previously about how sometimes that talking feels like taking action, but actually it's not. You need to make yourself do the thing.
Yes, absolutely.
And it sounds like you're really good at making yourself do the thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, sometimes it's happened on purpose, where I've made myself do the thing, and other times I've just been put in situations where I have to, So what are the options? You've got to make the change and strive for something new and take a risk, or you just stand still. So yes, but I love the podcast, by the way. I think what you're doing, Alex and Tiffany, is really brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'm learning so much from it, from just talking to people. And I think the more people we talk to, would you agree, Tiffany, just the different perspectives that we're getting as well. And that is interesting in itself to hear how different people do things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, it's been a journey, and it's really nice to kind of pull back the curtains a bit on very successful women and say, oh, what are you doing behind the curtains? How are you balancing motherhood with ambition? So I think that's really cool to know and to understand. And it's different for everyone, but we all have a similar set of challenges, and we just need to discuss it and help each other. And on that note, I was quite keen to know, I mean, you talk a lot about sort of your background and everything, but are there also any books that you've read that have really inspired you or shaped your mindset as well? Because I know we mentioned one about, is it Ikigai?
Ikigai. Yes. So yes, there's lots of books that have inspired me, but I can think of two that I'll mention today. So Ikigai, as you said, basically that book is the Japanese secret to a long and happy life, and it's by someone called Hector Garcia and Francis Morales. And Ikigai is a Japanese concept that refers to basically having a purpose and finding out what your purpose is and your direction in life, your motivation, your reason for living. And if we can all identify that, so if we can identify our Ikigai, it should help us live a longer, sort of happier, more fulfilling life. And I think that's really important because ultimately, yes, work is part of our life, but it's not our life. There's so much more to what gives us purpose. So I would highly recommend that book. And then the other book that I think is worth a read is a book called What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. And that's by Mark McCormack. And that book gives people advice and sort of, what I learned from it was essentially what you don't learn at school. So it's really important advice that you're not taught at school, but will help you succeed in your career. And it also is very inspirational because you don't need a degree. You don't need a fancy degree. That's great if you have one, but you don't need that. You just need to figure out what your strengths are, and you've got to use them. And you've also got to be very savvy as a person in business. So both of those books I would highly recommend.
Okay, fantastic. I haven't read either of those, so I'm looking forward to picking those up, and I think we'll put the links to those in the show notes as well, so people can find those and get a bit of inspiration. I was just going to ask, so how has having your daughter impacted on your career, and how do you juggle and manage that? What are your secrets and tips? And don't feel like you have the answers, because I feel like not do.
I don't think anyone has the answers, Alex, to be honest. Well, she was born in 2022, so a couple of years ago. And as most moms will relate to, really, my world changed completely. Our worlds do change. Priorities change. Mom guilt for me is always something that lingers in the background, always. Am I giving her enough attention? Am I doing enough work? There's all these things. And I remember, I wanted to go back to work, I took the full year, which I don't regret. I think that was fantastic, taking the full year of maternity leave. But I was ready to go back to work. But honestly, my confidence certainly took a dip. I had to constantly remind myself, that I was worthy. And all of a sudden, I didn't have to do this before, but I did have to sort of remind myself, yes, I'm worthy. Yes, I have skills. Yes, I can still do this.
Mm.
And I eventually realized, actually, that the skills that I learned becoming a mother were hugely valuable in the workplace. I learned to communicate better. I certainly developed some better negotiation skills. You become, I think, more empathetic, as a person. So the journey has been wonderful and chaotic at the same time, because I'm trying to manage, obviously, my job and being a mother. And being a mother is a 24-hour job. I actually dislike the word maternity leave, because I don't think it's leave.
At least.
That you don't leave. You
Oh,
don't go home. That's the truth. You're at home.
It's really not.
Yeah.
I feel like before I did maternity leave myself, I may have been guilty of thinking, "Oh, have a lovely time
Nice.
off."
Yeah.
Saying
Yeah.
that to people.
Yeah.
I'd never say that again. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
you come back to work and it's
But-
hard, the transition of going back to work. I totally get what you're saying about confidence taking a dip, but at the same time, some aspects of it are a lot easier.
Oh, exactly. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I loved going back to work and being able to order lunch and eat it while it was hot. And go to the toilet and have a pee on your own without anyone holding onto your leg. Little things that, honestly, but you're right. Some things are a lot easier and a lot more straightforward. Negotiating at work is easy compared to negotiating with a little one who doesn't want to change their nappy. But you're right, Alex. I was exactly the same before that. I thought, oh, did you have a good leave? I used to say things like that.
You born your baby.
Have a relaxing time off. I think you imagine people just sitting cuddling their
The baby.
baby and going out and drinking lattes with people.
Looking fabulous. God, yeah.
Napping,
Yeah. Different.
No, I actually didn't really take much for maternity leave, which is something I feel quite sad about, because I think I'm so ambitious. I felt like I couldn't take that time to just relax, because I worked for myself and I had a business during that time. I remember just in between meetings, having my dressing gown on, having a quick nap and going, having meetings. And now I sort of wish I took that time. But again, it's just this mind of someone who was ambitious and didn't want to stop. I didn't want to take that gap.
Yes.
But anyway, it's life and the decisions we make. But I'd love to, I remember also during the chat, we spoke about your perspective or wisdom as an older mum in terms of, the time you had your daughter. So I'd love to know what you've gained from that that time when you did it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So I certainly waited a while before I had my daughter. It never seemed like the right time. At work, it was always, oh, but I'm waiting for that promotion, or I'm waiting for this. And it was never the right time. So I waited. And that was obviously a choice. I think there are advantages. The benefits really for me is that, I'm more financially stable now. I have a larger network. Most of my friends have had children, so I can learn from them. And obviously, you get all the advice and all the hand-me-downs.
The hand-me-down. Oh, yeah.
Yes, please. No, not shy. Yes, I love it.
Exactly. But like you, Tiffany, I think sometimes I do regret not having her earlier, because I think, if you have your children earlier, you obviously get to spend longer with them, hopefully, as opposed to being an older mom. But then I do also think there's never a right time. So I think, if someone asks me when's the right time, I don't think there is ever a right time. I think it just depends on the person, and everyone has to sort of make their choice and go with that. But the advantages to me is just more stability. However, either way, I think children change your world. And that's something that will happen regardless of when you have them and how old you have them. Your world will change. And that's something that I don't think I was that ready for. I think people give you advice, but it doesn't, for me anyways, it didn't really sink in just how much your world changes.
Yeah.
And again,
I'm feeling this.
Yes. And it happens at any age. Yeah.
I think you're never ready for it. And I think, even if you think you're ready for it, you're not. You're definitely not. But I feel like it's something you have to live through to understand the difference that it will make to your life.
Absolutely. And something that I think with age sort of I gained in terms of wisdom as well was not to listen to too many people. Everyone seems to have an opinion, mums and people that are not mums as well. That everyone has an opinion on how you should do things when you become a mother. Actually, you just need to do whatever feels right for you. Yeah. So the good thing about being slightly older, I guess, is that I disregarded a lot of opinions. Whereas, maybe if I was younger, I would have sort of listened to everyone, and that sort of drives you a little bit crazy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also an older mother. I was 38, like a month after Ted was born, and I think for me, patience. I don't think I would have had the patience to be like a calm, kind. I think I'd have been a lot grumpier and snappier if I'd done this earlier. I'm being totally honest and candid here. I think I might have been less tired if I'd done it earlier.
Yeah.
But the patience, and I really agree with what you're saying there about the. I feel like maybe with age you have that confidence in yourself to push back on other people's opinions or just ignore them.
Yeah, no, that it's true. I think I think for me a lot of it is about the things I got to do before I became a mum. So now I can enjoy motherhood, and I don't feel like there's more to do that I'm missing out on. I don't have FOMO. I can stay in with them 5 days a week. We can go to the park in the morning. We go to park every single day, and I'm okay with that. I don't feel like, oh, I'm missing something out there, because I traveled, I did different things. I faced my fears quite a lot before I became a mum. So I feel that this is just mum time, and I'm going to lean into playing with trains, doing a lot of like role playing, and it's I think it's wonderful. I find it to be a privilege, and that's how I see motherhood. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you're right. I think maybe I would have felt the same if I was a bit younger. Maybe I'd be a bit more resentful that I didn't have the opportunity to do certain things. But like you, I've traveled, and I've done a lot of the things I wanted to do. So it's now about embracing. And also, Alex, I'm definitely more patient.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not. No one can be patient all the time, but I definitely feel like I have been given that gift of patience through my advanced years. It's just
advanced. I like that. It's a polished way to put it, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think they need to revise the description of geriatric mother. I feel like that's a very rude and unkind way of describing people. I remember them coming round afterwards and saying to me really bluntly, I needed to take injections for blood clots after I'd had Ted. And they came around and they said, because of your age, your weight, and the amount of blood you've lost, you will need to take these. And I was like, okay,
no.
pick me when I'm down, why don't you?
Oh my God.
I had that too, those were awful, those injections, weren't they?
I mean, I definitely prefer to do that than have a blood clot. But at the same time, I was like, well, don't sugarcoat it. Just tell me I need them. I'll still take them. I don't need to know why.
Yeah, we won't even talk about giving birth and all that lovely stuff.
Yeah, let's get that.
I think one key question we always ask most of our guests is, can mothers have it all?
That's a great question. I think personally, I don't think it's realistic to have it all. Well, there's a caveat to that. I believe we can have it all, but not at the same time. So for me, there's a lot of pressure on, what I see anyways, there's a lot of pressure on working moms out there. And I don't think it's helpful to tell people that they can have it all and assume that it's even achievable, because, something will suffer. I think it's important to have your, to balance and focus on your priorities. Yes, you can have it all, but in my opinion, not at the same time. And if you do manage to have it all at the same time, something will suffer, because that's just logic. You can't focus on too many things at the same time. And that's just my opinion. But I know there's a lot out there about this, and I don't think it's helpful. I think it gives people unrealistic expectations, and it just makes them feel worse about themselves.
Yeah. I would really agree with that. I think we've talked to some people who say you can have it all if you work out what that all is for you, but that actually doing everything is unrealistic.
Yes.
I don't know if it might have been you when we had our sort of previous conversation, but somebody said to me it's about juggling lots of different balls, but they're made of different materials, and knowing which ones can be dropped. Some of them are made of glass, some of them are made of rubber, some of them will bounce, some of them you can drop and it's fine. And it's knowing which ones you can let go.
That wasn't me, but that's very good. That's a very good analogy. I like that one.
Yeah. I thought it might have been some wisdom that you shared with us earlier, but I think that the analogy holds up. I think that it probably is about knowing which things you can let go of. But
absolutely, but you can pick them back up again. I think it's just timing, though, isn't it? It's about, realizing what your priorities are, having goals and time frames, and not being too strict on what those time frames are, because life has changed. So, and life changes all the time. So again, our priorities will change in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. So yes, you can have it all, but it might not be today. If that's the expectation, or at least if anyone finds a way of having it all today, to let me know, because I just don't.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Here's my details.
Someone let me know. Exactly.
I like that. I think I've recently come up with. I read there's a book called Olivia Burke. I can't remember the name now. It's one of my favorite books. It's about time, and it's I think called 24,000 Weeks. I don't want to get that wrong, but it's
I'm going to Google it.
Yeah, Oliver
You keep
Burke.
talking.
It's about the lifespan of an average human being. So basically, it's about time, but not so much time from a productivity perspective. More about being efficient with time, and more about just realizing that, again, priorities. So I've come up with this idea that I was inspired by the book. Did you find it? Oliver Burke,
not yet.
24,000 weeks, something. It's a time in weeks. And what I've come up with myself now, just to help myself with this whole idea, is seasons. So what season am I in? Am I in my fitness season? If I'm in my fitness season, my fitness is very important to me. So I will make time for it. I would, drop the balls to exercise. If I'm in my, kind of recruitment season, I'm focusing on getting as many placements I can, get as much money as I can. That's my season. The next season for me is actually to start looking at my money. Do I want to save? Do I want to invest? I'm going to start reading books about that. I'm recently reading Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money, because I'm getting ready for my next season of saving and investing. In that season of life, I'm not going to be doing much of other things. I'm not going to be trying to learn this about, that. I'm just going to be really prioritizing that when I have spare time. So I suppose the question I wanted for you is, do you have any kind of strategies like that? Do you have like a spreadsheet, or how do you actually like sit down and plan things out in that way?
I love that, Tiffany. I'm really old school, so I have it like a to-do list. So I literally, yes, I make to-do lists, and I still do that. But the reason I do that is not just because I will forget. There's just too many things to do. There's a lot, as we know, we're juggling multiple goals. Some goals are bigger, obviously, some to-dos. Some to-dos are smaller. I'll write them all down. And, I take great pride in ticking them off. I actually think that's a confidence booster, is if I can go, oh my God, today I've done this, this, and this, and this, or, and tomorrow I'm going to do this. So that's my tactic. I used to just think about what I had to do and do it. But what I found was, first of all, you drop. The small things will drop. You'll forget them. As a mom, this might just be me, but I forget things now that are not, that I wouldn't have forgotten before. I don't know if it's mom brain or whatever, but I do forget things. So I have to write them down. And that's how I get things done. I think it's just efficient to make a note of them and get on with it.
I do love a to-do list, and I will write something on it that I've done and hadn't written down, just for that satisfaction of crossing it off.
Brush teeth, wash face.
Exactly. Wash hair.
Progress.
I feel like when you're in that immediate after having had a baby, you should praise yourself for doing those things.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And it just depends what season you're in. As Tiffany said, like if you're in newborn season, then that is a huge achievement, having a shower and washing your hair,
Left the house before noon.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah. Wow.
I think, Tiffany, the book that you're referring to is called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman.
Yes, that's Burkeman. That's the man. Sorry, Oliver Burkeman. I am butchering your name out here, right? But no, I really love that book. I think it's just one for, like I was saying, because there's so many books about productivity and doing more with time and getting more, squeezing more lemons out of the juice of life. But he was like, no, like this is the time you have. You can't do everything. You can try and size everything as much as you can. But sometimes you've got to think what's important. Let some things drop. And it's just much more realistic view of time. And I really found that useful.
Yes.
I think it's helpful in the not beating yourself up as well. I think talking about mum guilt being a real thing. No wonder people suffer from mum guilt, actually, when all of this narrative around having it all, trying to do more and more and more and more. And like, you feel like everyone else is managing to do that because that's the front they present to the world. And really, it's one of the key motivators for the podcast, that seeing behind, like Tiffany said before, seeing behind the curtain, seeing how people actually manage it. And it's motivating me to be more and more feministy and more I see that work and some of the structures around work and childcare just need to change for women to ever be truly equal, because of all of this extra stuff that falls on women. No wonder they feel guilty and like they're not doing it right.
Absolutely. I mean, even if you think, I was thinking about this. My daughter is called Layla, and she's not at school yet. But I was thinking, how do mums do it when they go to school? And I think, when does school close? Is it at 3 or 3? So what do you do after that?
I think we've all got a rude awakening coming for us in a couple of years.
So you're right. Society just needs to change. It's a bit ridiculous to expect women to. How can you do everything? You can't be in 2 places at once.
No.
Impossible.
And they're just relying on people getting grandparents to do it for free, but not everyone has that privilege or that ability.
Exactly.
Yeah. You working on anything at the moment, Nabila, or in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year? You have anything coming up for you in your career or in life?
Right now, what I'm involved in, which is quite exciting, is I've been judging the Power Up Awards. So She Can Code Power Up Awards, which is brilliant, because what it does basically is it highlights all these brilliant young girls that are achieving things in technology. So actually just reading through the nominations and judging that, which I'm doing at the moment, has been hugely inspiring, really, to see all these young girls. There's many things I'm working on at work, and there's various things also in my personal life, actually. So what I'll say is watch this space. Lots of new things happen.
Okay.
So I'll be taking a few more risks anyways in the next few months.
Nice.
We'll add your LinkedIn to the notes as well, so people can follow you and just be inspired by what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
Is that the best place for people to find you? Is LinkedIn your window to the world?
Yes.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, we'll wrap it up there. It's been a really, really interesting conversation. I wish it could be longer, but I know we're targeting mothers who don't have time, so
got to keep it short and snappy.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Nabila. It's been so inspiring spending this time with you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Tiffany.
It's been fabulous. We will really watch this space, and we'll be in touch with you, I'm sure, to hear more about it.
Great.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thanks
Take care.
a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.